Chapter 12:11. Trial Tested. Joram was battered as he exited the trial, where the clerics immediately healed him. That trial is cruel. At first, I thought it was going to be all right, but at the end, it was just picking on me. However, I did get a reward. He informed them with an exhausted smile on his face. A reward? So, we should send priority members first, before the rewards are gone. The vice principal asked. Carl shook his head. No, I set a bunch of reward templates in the trial. It is actually making random rewards on its own, based on performance and the will of the gods. That is truly impressive. Is that something that you have learned in the Dragon Isles? Perhaps you were exiled to a true paradise. Nacht asked. Carl shook his head. I actually learned it on the Nea continent, when Supreme Lady Matilda sent me to look into the restrictions on system activation that are still present there. Never mind. Just having to deal with that woman gives me a headache. Carl chuckled at the dragon's immediate change of heart. But soon, he would realize that she was their wedding planner, and everyone was going to be under her supervision, since she was the only one who knew all of the plans. Everyone else knew a part that was relevant to them, but she was the one with the master plan, and the future sight to keep things from going wrong. Should we call for pickup? Dana asked. It would be getting late in the Dragon Isles, and they'd managed to collect everyone that they came looking for in just one day. That was much better than expected, and it would give them at least a few days to prepare for the ceremony itself once they were in place. Matilda had been collecting all the guests from the Dragon Isles, and with her efficiency, they should be the last to arrive. Mostly because she was unlikely to listen to complaints that they were busy with something else when she came looking for them. Matilda's original idea had been simply to perform a summoning ritual, which would pull every guest on the continent to her at the same time. But after a common-sense intervention by Tessa, who had reminded her that someone might be in the privy or naked in bed when she performed the ritual, she had vowed to give them all warning. Matilda, could you open a portal? We've got all the guests from the Golden Dragon Nation collected. Carl messaged. Of course. I'm just cleaning up a minor issue here first. Carl frowned. Has someone been causing trouble? The Blue Dragon has an issue with my schedule, and she decided to fight me when I took her notepad away. The Chaos Dragon replied. That had to mean Sapphire, but Carl could see any of the Blue Dragon priestesses starting a fight if someone interrupted their study time. Tell her that she can work on the guests that we're bringing from the Golden Dragon Nation. Some of them have advanced already, but we've still got some who have not. Carl replied. Yes, that calmed her for a moment. I will open the portal now. The portal she opened led to what looked like something between a fantasy wonderland and a fever dream, just a touch wrong, in a way that Carl couldn't quite place. It was most likely in the Chaos Plane, but he had to admit that it was beautiful. Well suited to hosting weddings. Welcome guests. My name is Matilda, and I will be your host for the duration of your stay. Please, follow me this way to the lodging, she declared, while the guests stared at Carl with a look that conveyed their absolute reluctance to go along with the strange dragon. She looked friendly enough, but her smile was a bit too much like the smile that a fat man gives a whole cake. Predatory joy. Everyone stared at the surreal scenes all around them, and then hundreds of small flying creatures, possibly fairies and pixies, but not like any picture of them that Carl had ever seen before, appeared to guide guests to their rooms. Lady Ray has prepared evening wear for you all, and I have planned a lovely evening at the hot springs and spas for everyone. You can trust that your assigned guides will take wonderful care of you. Do not worry about their size. Their magic is enough to solve any sort of issue you might have. Matilda instructed. Carl extended soul sight and found that there were already dozens of people on the other side of what must be their hotel. They were lounging in natural springs, and Carl wondered how he could have forgotten to add those to his tiny space. He had a wonderful lake and a flowing river, but both were cool and refreshing. The polar opposite of the sort of relaxation you got from a hot spring. Perhaps he should add one on the backside of the house, up in the hills and out of sight of the majority of the space. Ray handed Carl a bathrobe, which he swapped into as they entered the building, headed for the showers, so they were clean before they entered the hot springs. Men to the right, ladies to the left. No mixed bathing today. The tiny flying creature following Carl around insisted. Carl winked at the little creature. So, there might be mixed bathing later? Its laughter was like the tinkling ring of wind chimes, but with an otherworldly echo that seemed to shake the soul. There is a private hot spring in the honeymoon suite, sir. The little creature winked at him, then giggled and began to fly circles around his head. Matilda had done a wonderful job planning this outing, but Carl still had one important question. Where exactly are we? He asked. This is the Fey realm. Lady Matilda wanted to hold it at her own estate, but not all of the guests would be comfortable in the Chaos realm, especially with so many chromatic dragons present. So, the decision was made to hold it on this plane instead. Chapter 12:12, Fey Springs. Carl nodded in understanding, then remembered that he actually had a skill suited to traveling to places like this. Planeswalker World Dragon Patron exclusive skill. 100 points. Allows portals to open between adjacent realms the user is familiar with. It hadn't mattered before because he hadn't been anywhere but the Chaos realm, and he was able to leave there easily enough, thanks to his affinity for the fundamental rule of chaos. But being here was more like being on a whole other world. Not nearly as easy to simply come and go from. The men's side of the hot springs were already rowdy when Carl arrived because someone had made a joke about the dwarves accidentally drowning in the bath if they sat down, and that turned into an argument about proportionate anatomy. Carl's dad walked in behind him and chuckled at the sight. You know, for all that has changed, it's good to see that you didn't forget your own people. Even though they're so much more powerful than any of the miners, it's still the same rowdy lot as you grew up with. He whispered. From the edge of the springs, Slate Petros laughed. Come and sit, Senior Carl. Let me tell you about the dwarven mines. Carl's dad removed his robe, then got a shocked look on his face when it actually vanished. Oh, that is new. The little Fey's voice rang in Carl's mind. Indeed, it was. His father had just gained a system interface when he tried to remove an equipable item in the Fey realm. And he was a warrior. Of course, he was. Interesting. The system can still activate here, as long as it's a system-linked item. I didn't even know that was possible. Matilda cheered from right behind Carl, making most of the others jump. The dragon was in the form of a mature and extremely busty elven woman today. The men were much less modest, and Carl's dad was shocked at the intrusion. Madam, I believe that this is the men's bath, he stammered. It's fine, I just came over to see how you had activated a system interface when we're not on the right planet. Sit, relax. This will only take me a few minutes, she declared, then tossed her towel to one of the small flying Fey and pulled him down into the springs. Jake looked scandalized as he turned to his son, but Carl just shrugged. Neither dragons nor elves are usually body shy, but you will enjoy learning about the dwarven mines. They're absolutely incredible, and they have some excellent worker practices that might work well at home. Jake sighed, then did his best to ignore the naked woman who was intently staring at him. Thor waved as he came into the springs, and a surprising number of the guests greeted him in return. Thor was still the king of making new friends, and they had arrived a full day earlier than Carl had, giving him plenty of time to get to know everyone before the bride and groom got to the venue. Carl, welcome back. You are going to love this place. There are so many fun new people, and they even have a training ground, Thor announced. Oh? Somewhere with smashing poles? Thor chuckled and nodded. Indeed. I was sparring with a group of young Fey warriors earlier in my natural form. They are quite skilled. Lord Drod chuckled. Mostly, they're good at not getting stepped on. The Fey are notoriously agile, beyond what should be physically possible. Just trying to catch them to hit them is hard enough. Thor has an advantage in that his attacks all hit a large area, so the Fey have to dodge more than just his foot. But even then, they put him through his paces. I've never seen a behemoth move like that before. Thor thumped his chest proudly. I practiced all my life to smash targets. But the Fey are the trickiest ones I've found yet. His praise made all their hosts glimmer with sparkling lights, similar to the effect that opal gave off in the sunlight. It gave the baths an extra layer of relaxing effects, and Carl heard Lotus complaining on the other side of the dividing wall that the boys were getting all the good stuff. In her mind, that was completely unacceptable, and Carl suspected that the Green Dragon Priestess would be pushing for mixed bathing tomorrow, just so that she didn't miss out on sparkly fae. Her complaints did earn the other side of the bath a short light show, as the fae's amusement at her antics spread through the bathing area. The men's side of the bath chuckled as Lotus' complaints turned to cheering, and Carl's father turned to ask him about the commotion. Is that the child of one of your friends? Or is it just a particularly excitable sort of lady? The latter. She is a green dragon cleric, and her love of all things fluffy, sparkly, and even remotely huggable has been cranked up to an extreme degree. She's an incredible healer, though. There are very few things that she can't cure in a few seconds, and she can even heal a whole section of a battlefield or an entire neighborhood at the same time. Carl explained. Jake chuckled. We met one of them in town last year. Quite the character. The first thing that she asked us was if we had seen a dire bear nearby. She had never seen one in person and wanted to see if they were actually as aggressive as she had been told. Neil sighed and shook his head. I remember that one. We had to send a team to rescue her when she actually found the dire bear, and it chased her all the way to a farming village trying to recover its cub. The dragons present all snickered at the man's exasperated tone. That sort of behavior was 100% on par for a green dragon cleric, especially if she had heard that there was a way for certain classes to bond magical beasts. Chapter 12:13. He still got a baby dragon. After an hour of socializing in the hot springs, the hosts informed them that it was time for the midday meal. Carl hadn't considered the time difference when they had arrived, but it was at least manageable. Everyone simply changed into comfortable loose robes provided by the hotel, and Carl waited by the changing room for Dana to come out. But she did not come out alone. Button and Lyric were with her, brought from the tiny world by Kara, along with an older supervisor that Carl didn't recognize, but that Dana apparently did. The little dragon and Lotus were animatedly discussing the various ways that you could use plant growth spells, while Button held hands with Dana, so she didn't get lost. Ophelia smirked when she saw that Carl had noticed them, and took Lotus' hand with a sly wink, then walked beside Dana, so the short people could continue to talk. It looked a bit odd to see them both talking and gesturing with just one hand, because someone was holding their other, but the guests found it absolutely adorable. Are you adopting a baby dragon after I told you that you couldn't have a dragon egg? Knack joked when he saw the scene. She lives in a tiny world that I created. She's become attached to Dana, and to anyone else who will spend time with her while everyone else is busy. Carl whispered back. Then he realized something. I've actually obtained a number of dragon eggs lately. There was a group of dragon hunters from another world who were capturing dragons and breeding them for combat, similar to the Drake Riders. But I didn't see any signs that they were riding them, just causing them to go berserk and accompany their forces to attack. The black dragon frowned. I have heard of them. There were some in Nubon not long ago, but the Emperor and General teamed up to eliminate them. It was quite the pain, as they brought a number of berserk dragons with them. What did you do with the dragons that they had trained? Carl shrugged. I just broke the spells on them and let them free on the Nia continent. They'll have to figure things out from there on their own. But there were a number of leftover eggs whose mothers were not present, or not willing to claim them. So, I brought them into the tiny world and placed them in an appropriate environment for their development. I have a group of druids and nature priestesses, the group that Button belongs to, caring for them until they hatch. Knack nodded slowly. And then what? And then I have 200 baby dragons? Carl asked hopefully. Knack rolled his eyes in dismay. I will arrange for someone to come collect them after they hatch. We can take them to the church or specifically a red dragon orphanage for raising. The first few years can be a bit chaotic, but plenty of dragons are raised in them, so we have the experience. Carl smiled. Why didn't I think of that? I can just recruit more red dragon clerics for the job. I've already got some in the workspace in Drod. I volunteered them some extra space in exchange for having the older orphans work the market while they look for full-time work. Naksha crept up beside them and bumped shoulders with her uncle. He's slowly collecting them all. All we need now are gold, bronze, and white. We've even got a silver dragon living at the Drod Guild House because he wanted to study the experiment that the blue dragons are doing. She greeted them. Carl smiled at her, then realized that the dragons smelled different than he remembered. You're about to reach totem rank, he realized. Naksha nodded. Indeed. Being with the Darklight host has been good for me. I'm years ahead of schedule. By the time that the wedding is over, I should be there. And I've got a solid start on my power matrix, so I shouldn't slow down too much after I advance. Nak smiled at his niece. It's good to see you again. At least the Carl has someone reasonably responsible looking out for him. She giggled and winked at him. I'm not the responsible one. That would be either Tessa or Librarian Sapphire. That dragon is absolutely driven to organize things. You should see how tidy the library in the guild house is now. She thoroughly organized the tomes after she arrived. Originally, we just had them separated by themes onto shelves. Now they're in the proper dragon library organizational order, by title and age. Nact poked her in the side. By Librarian Sapphire? Do you mean? Yep, that one. The myth who refused to pick a trade skill. She's actually got one now, though. Carl granted her runecrafting, and she's been doing wonderful things with it. But mostly, she's been making skill books to help with her mission to eliminate the base warrior class from Overlord and higher ranks. Naksha laughed. That made the old dragon laugh. I should have known that the day she finally left the library to accomplish something other than training generations of blue dragons to organize books, she would pick something so absolutely insane. Naksha shook her head. Oh, I wouldn't call it insane. It's actually working. They've converted hundreds of them so far. Mostly into paladins and crusaders. But they've also created some blood knights, advanced berserker classes, and one mystic blade master. That one shocked everyone, but a warrior managed to learn a monk's fighting style on his own, and asked to try to learn lightning bolt. Somehow it actually worked and he got a new class. We suspect it's because he's a lightning affinity dragonkin, but they are waiting until they can replicate the phenomenon to prove the theory. Nact frowned at Carl. You really are a bad influence, you know that, right? Even after they sent you to the Dragon Isles, you're still causing chaos. Kara preened with pride, and Carl smirked at the black dragon. Did I ever tell you the story of how I managed to defeat a mythic-ranked warrior in a one-on-one guild duel? Chapter 12-14, Dinner and History. Sitting at dinner, the conversation was lively, and Opal had colluded with Matilda to have multiple illusionary screens playing back dozens of interesting scenes from Carl and Dana's lives. The crowd was enthralled by the spectacle, as most of them had been present for at least one of the events shown, and Opal had tactfully skipped over the private moments when she created the montage. Well, most of them. Carl could see that there were a few touching scenes included, including one from just the other day, when they were sitting on the mountaintop and meditating while Button slept on Carl's lap. Who are the cat and the fox? I don't see them here, Carl's father asked quietly. That's me and Dana. It's a transformation skill, and the furred form really is more comfortable to relax in. The temperature control is spectacular, like being in the upper levels of the mine, where it's not too hot, but never gets cold. Carl explained. Jake's eyes lit up in joy as he realized that all those scenes were actually his son, and not something that he was present for or had helped orchestrate. Some of them he couldn't understand, either because the sight was too bizarre, or because the superhuman physical abilities made it impossible for his eyes to keep up. But now that he knew who all the people were in the scenes, it made much more sense. The servers at dinner were all elves, and they giggled as they saw Lyric sitting next to Dana with a cloth napkin tucked in her collar. It was the only way to convince Button not to continually remove her own, but though the elf appeared to be barely a teenager, she was closer to 40 years old in human years. Far too old to not know how to eat without making a mess. Button was intent on disassembling her dinner so that she could identify every single ingredient. Most of them didn't grow anywhere that she had ever been, but the food was wonderful and she needed answers. Why don't we ask if you and Lotus can talk to the cook after dinner? They will be able to tell you all the right ratios to recreate the meal, Carl suggested. Button paused her disassembly and smiled. I get to bring Sister Lotus? Carl nodded. She has a skill known as mystic cooking, and I believe that it might be necessary to create these dishes. The flying fae overhead giggled. Oh, he got it right the first time. He's good. It wasn't just the foreign ingredients. Part of the taste was also the magic that went into the creation. One of the flying fae landed on top of Carl's wine glass and waved to get his attention. Do you really have people who can use mystic cooking? She asked. Carl nodded. Out of the ones here, I think there are just 2 of them, but yes. I must tell the cook. They love to discuss food with people who actually understand. Then the fae was gone, just a streak of shimmering light as she raced off toward the kitchen. You just make friends everywhere that you go. Dana laughed as the fae flying overhead all began to chatter about the prospect of new foods from the kitchen after the cook met Lotus. The meal wasn't all vegetarian, which was surprising to Carl, but on closer inspection, not all of the fae were vegetarian. The elves had either mushroom or tofu dishes in place of the meat dishes, but some of the fae servants could be seen snacking on what looked like chicken wings as they waited for their skills to be needed again. Plates were cleared, and a round of coffees were brought out by the staff for those who wanted them. Nobody was in a hurry to go anywhere. They were all well relaxed from the hot springs, and the staff had promised them that there were more fun activities later. Fun being a relative term. They had obstacle courses, training grounds, hiking trails, an aerial exploration route, a full-service spa, luxury shopping, and even an amusement park. Ophelia said that she will take me, Lotus, and Button for a nature hike, so we can see all the new plants. Lyric announced as Carl tried to decide how to spend his day. Dana smiled. I will take our mothers for a spa day. It shouldn't take more than 6 or 8 hours, unless we fall asleep in the spa. Carl saw that his dad was deep in discussion with the dwarves about the merits of various mining techniques, so he chose to leave them to it for now. I think that I will head for the training grounds with some of the others, and then bring Father and the dwarves to the tavern. Fey liquor promises to be a new experience. He agreed. A few of the Fey laughed. The dwarves had a grudge against the elven wine that was the most popular alcoholic beverage in the Fey realms. But there were other options, and none of them would ever be considered the equal to dwarven ale. At least not by the dwarves. Fortunately, there were dwarves in the Fey realm, so they did have it available. But if Carl was looking for a new experience, he was unlikely to find one with that particular group. But before they could say anything, Carl was already off to the training grounds, where the majority of the demons and dragons had gone to compete with each other. Even Sapphire was there. Whether that was for the eye candy or because she wanted technical data for an experiment was unclear. However, she was in attendance and sitting in the bleachers. Carl, are you going to join us? We're having a wrestling match. No skills, no flying, no striking. Lord Drott asked. Carl smiled. Sounds fun to me. Just let me standardize my size a little. Being short and strong is an unfair advantage in a grappling match. Chapter 12:15. Spa Day. While Carl transformed and prepared for a bit of sport, Dana led a group of women into the spa area. Ladies, prepare to be pampered. Matilda has promised me that this is one of the greatest resources of the entire facility, and her skills in party planning are legendary. Dana announced. An aged elven woman smiled at them as they entered. Ah, the wedding party, including the mothers. The Supreme Lady informed us that you would be along soon. Now, would you like to start light, or would you like the full experience? Dana shrugged. We might as well go all out. How often will we even have the opportunity to come back here, right? That made the old elf laugh. Well, if you live as long as I have, there will surely be more chances. But I hear that your groom is an avatar of the world dragon. It shouldn't be hard for him to return here in the future. Now, would you like to start from the hair down, or the feet up? Carl's mom shrugged. Feet up sounds good. I spend far too much time on my feet, and they can always use a bit of loving. My husband, bless his heart, is still terrible at giving a foot massage, even after 2 decades of practice. He still tried. Every time they had a day off, he would attempt to pamper her. But years in the mines had numbed his hands, and he had no concept of what was too hard or too soft. She didn't criticize him openly, but it would be wonderful to have a proper masseuse. They were all led to comfortable chairs, and their feet placed in tubs of what looked like milk. It's a rejuvenating potion, with fey coconuts as the base. Don't worry, we checked everyone for allergies when you first arrived. The attendant explained. 3 younger elves came out to attend to Dana, Wendy, and Ella. But Naksha, who was a few chairs down from them, got very different treatment. Her attendant was a 2-meter-tall shirtless dryad man. The black dragon winked at the 2 older women, who looked faintly scandalized. Then Naksha sighed as he began to massage her legs, letting her feet soak in the rejuvenating potion. The elves laughed quietly when the dragon moaned as the masseuse began to work the stiffness out of her legs. But Naksha didn't even notice. His hands were magic, in the most literal sense. All of the masseuse staff were healers, and they worked healing magic into the body along with the tonics as they performed the massage. For the black dragon, who served the god of death, the reaction to that steady influx of life force was rather different from the others. The euphoric feeling of a foot massage by a healer had Dana in a blissful fog for most of the next hour, until it was time to move to the massage tables for the rest of the relaxation therapy. Naksha was taken to a separate room, and both mothers had to do their very best not to giggle at the situation. I can't believe that they actually offer such services, Carl's mother whispered. The elf massaging her back winked at her. We offer all sorts of services here, but it's probably not as unwholesome as you are thinking. Well, maybe. They seem to have pretty good chemistry. Surprising for a black dragon. Ella looked shocked. She's a dragon? Right, I forgot that they can just transform. I haven't had a chance to meet most of these people before, you see. The elf nodded. When you are stuck at the common rank, it's not safe to be hanging around in areas where everyone is at totem rank or higher. There are regions of the Fey realm where even I don't go, just so that I don't get overwhelmed by the auras of all the immortals. They don't mean any harm, but when they get excited or angry, they release quite a potent aura. She was at the monarch rank, strong by Golden Dragon Nation standards, but compared to most of the guests or even the average of the Dragon Isles, it was hardly impressive. Wendy, Dana's mother, sighed. It's a shame that I was born before the elites started to awaken across our nation. It might have been cool to be able to go on adventures instead of just reading about them. Dana smirked. You know, if I spend a bit of time making a book, we might be able to help both of you awaken. Especially here, where there is so much magic. Both mothers froze to stare at her. You can just awaken people's system access like that? Ella asked. Yes, and it doesn't seem to matter that we're on another world. Jake already did, and entirely accidentally. He's become a warrior. That's where Matilda vanished to earlier. She wanted to examine the changes in someone who awakened that late. Dana explained. Ella paused. Were they not all still in the bath when she left? Dana laughed. They were. And I can only imagine what the look on his face was when she showed up in the men's bath. But she's hundreds of thousands of years old. Nobody tells her where she can and can't go. In a way, it made sense to Ella. After all this time, it was like watching a child. Hardly interesting at all. Or so she assumed. I think that it would be harder to make him stop talking to those miners he found than anything else. If there is one thing that Jake can talk about for hours, it's stone and the mines. She sighed. Given his nature, she wasn't worried about the dragon woman stealing her husband. Dana chuckled. You know, we realized when we got to the Dragon Isles that Carl is at least part dwarf. If he is, then so is his father. So, it's only natural that he would inherit their racial instincts. I wonder if they're still talking about stone and digging, or if they're on to a new topic yet. Chapter 12:16, Dwarven Instincts. Not only were they on to another topic, the Fae had taken great interest in Jake now that he had gained a system class. The system wasn't active in the Fae realms, or it normally wasn't. So, this was a whole new experience for them. When you lived for thousands of years, new things were one of the greatest experiences of your year, even when they were seemingly mundane to others. So, Matilda and Jake had gained a large crowd of onlookers who were enthralled with his attempts to master the activation of his new skills. Slate had given him a war pick as a celebratory gift, as it was the tool that he would be most familiar with. The pick on one side, just like he had swung all his life, and the hammer on the other side, the same as was used to pound metal rods into the stone to create holes for blasting charges. Now, they had drills for that, but when he was young, they were all pounded with hammers and a metal rod. He only had a few system-linked skills, the base ones of the warriors, cleave and guard. But that was enough to get him started on his training, and Remy was working on a whole new set of potions to help late bloomers catch up to everyone else. The Carl's father had a natural affinity for the war pick, and while he hadn't ever trained as a warrior, he was already very strong. A few more transferred skills and a few potions should make it easy for him to at least reach high awakened rank, maybe ascended before the end of the wedding. That would make it funny when he went home. Remy had never been to the Carl's hometown, but from what she remembered, there weren't any strong people there at all, or any strong monsters to defend against. So, if she got his father properly set up, he might be able to take over and become the big boss. That would be a good wedding gift. Sister Ray had won the wedding preparation contest, since she made everyone new outfits. But Remy was pretty sure that she could make a strong showing if she helped advance the father of the groom. She didn't have a potion strong enough for most of the others, though. She needed better stuff. But not now. These elves knew just how to massage her scales, and she was nearly turned into a puddle at this point, just stretched out on the massage bench as she extended her senses into her space to see what the Carl was up to. Remy was quite satisfied with this level of treatment. She even got a second elf because her body was so long. They had buffed, oiled, polished, and massaged every centimeter of her body, and even massaged her scalp until her eyes rolled back. Who knew that elves could do that? Could the ones in the tiny world do it? Or did you have to train them? There weren't many children here at the moment, unless you counted Button and Lyric. So, there wasn't anyone at Jake's skill level with their abilities. But there were plenty of patient skills instructors, and Jake was quickly getting the hang of keeping his guard up while he attacked. Carl had refrained from joining the sparring so that he could encourage his dad. But he could tell that it was somewhat embarrassing for him to let his son instruct him in the basics. So Carl was just watching while Raj and Lord Drod sparred. Both were on the stronger side of mythic rank, but the Drod Lord had the clear advantage. His skills were faster and more refined, a testament to his ability to hold Drod against outside threats for centuries. While Carl watched, he got an interesting idea. He could recreate that desk he saw in the tower, the bookstore they had visited during the Winter Festival. That would create all the basic supplies he needed to make skill books. But for now, he could just transfer his father a few more skills directly after he mastered the basics. Ray was already making him armor. Carl, why don't we show him what he's working toward? Do you have an axe and shield or a pick? Slate asked. Carl nodded. I've got both. Which do you prefer? Or I can call a golem to spar with, so you can show off how to deal with wild magical beasts. The dwarf smiled in satisfaction. That's an even better idea. What can you call as a golem? Carl shrugged. Most types of standard beasts as my regular golems. I usually use a dire bear. But that might be a bit extreme for my old man. Jake chuckled. Nobody went one-on-one with a dire bear at the same rank. That was just common sense according to the movies. Carl called a pair of stone-skin boars, and had one come sit at his feet, while the other went to the sparring ring to meet with Petros. The dwarf had a battle hammer in his hand, and a large rectangular shield, a favorite of the dwarves. As soon as Petros was set, the boar charged, and Carl let it just go by instinct, with instructions not to leave the sparring ring. They were both at the totem rank, so the combat was much faster than anything that Jake could hope to accomplish on his own. But the way that the seemingly slow and stout dwarven shaman blocked, turned and attacked as the boar charged was enlightening. Slate wasn't using any skills other than Lightning Hammer, an enhancement on his weapon that activated on contact. That was a better approximation of how a warrior fought than his usual shamanistic skills. But it also gave him more time to spar with the boar. The extra exercise was good for him. He spent too much time dealing with city council issues lately, and not nearly enough time on physical pursuits. If he didn't find more time to keep up his training, he was worried that he would get slow and rusty. Perhaps he could ask the Carl to make something for Bara like he made for the Golden Dragon Nation. A training ground where they could go at any rank and build their combat skills. After all, not everyone was an overlord, but that was the only dungeon they had. Chapter 12:17, Nuance. There really is a lot of nuance to combat, even when it looks like you're just hitting things with a hammer. Jake noted as he watched Slate Petros tilt his shield to allow the boar to overrun him, and get the shield underneath its belly, where he could toss it off its feet, where he could attack the more vulnerable underside. The two combatants separated with the boar limping, and Carl dismissed it. Slate chuckled. And that's about how you deal with boars, you see? Same sort of shield you're using, just adapt the attack to the weapon you've got available. Jake nodded. I think that I get it now. You don't overpower the beast, you use its momentum against it so that you can strike at the flanks. The dwarf nodded. Exactly. If you're fighting wild beasts, you're unlikely to be the larger combatant, so you need to use the advantages that you have. Now, I'm a shaman, so I don't normally fight them up close like that. But warriors don't have as many options. I'm sure that Carl can help you gain a few new skills, but the ones that warriors can use aren't as widely varied as other classes. If you're good with a bow, you could fight at a distance, but other than that, it's almost all up close and personal. That's better anyhow. Some things need to be hit at a distance, but smashing it with a hammer is just so much more satisfying. Jake agreed. The spectators chuckled. He was definitely part dwarf. You said that Carl could teach me new skills, but I heard that he's not a warrior-type class. He added. Carl nodded. I'm not. My specialty is beasts, but I also have a number of skills related to making magical items and training skills. It's sort of a comprehensive assistant skill set. Here, this is one of my favorites and the first skill I ever had. Rend is compatible with warriors and has a bit of range to it, so you can strike from a few dozen meters away and pull a wild monster to you. Champion Carl offers knowledge skill Rend will be transferred to the stalwart defender Jake. Jake frowned, then nodded, and turned back to the training dummy. A downward swing of the hammer sent a vertical arc of Rend at the dummy, and he smiled, then nodded in satisfaction. That's much better than cleave. Similar in usage, but just generally better. I see here in the system interface thing that I have a lot of skills available for points, but I don't have any points to buy them with. That's not really surprising, as I'm new to this. But with time, I should be able to become a proper warrior-type elite. Carl nodded. It usually takes years of practice and missions before new elites are ready to go out and face the world alone. You've got a fully active system interface, which is an advantage. But going from worker's advocate to warrior is going to be a bit of a change. The others laughed at Carl's comment. Usually, it was the other way around. You started out fighting your way up through the ranks, and only when you had reached the peak of your ambition or abilities did you transition to an office job. But the Golden Dragon Nation was not like the Dragon Isles, and they had so many common rank humans that they needed them to help run things. That was rapidly changing, and given 2 generations it would no longer be the case, but for now it was the status quo. The staff brought out snacks, and the men took a break, while wondering what the ladies were up to right now. The answer was that they were on to the facial rejuvenation phase of the spa treatment, where the Fae used potions and magical massage techniques to reduce or eliminate the signs of aging. While elves lived for over 1,000 years, they would still age or gain weathered features from years in the elements, so they had perfected this process ages ago. They had never actually used it on a human before, but it should work well enough. Both their immortal bosses and the Chaos Dragon had confirmed that nothing during this visit would harm the guests. Having someone who could see the future was purely cheating. Though, it was also a bit of a headache, as Matilda and Misty were making vague jokes about things that hadn't happened yet, while Kara kept rolling around and gesturing to respond to them. Can someone find the badger a transformation amulet? Hand gestures to answer are not massage-friendly. The masseuse finally complained. Kara giggled, a sound reminiscent of a happy chainsaw, and then transformed into her humanoid form. A teen beastkin girl with badger ears, and a white stripe down the middle of her black hair. Thank you, that's much better. The masseuse sighed in relief. Yes, speaking directly is an improvement, even if I'm only part badger. But the revival of the Bunga forests, right? The other 2 seers nodded happily, and the elf shook her head in dismay. Everything was some sort of inside joke or vague reference with them because they were all talking about things that they had seen in visions or at a different point in time. Possibly even a different timeline. Misty frowned at Kara. Are you sure that you don't want me to help you change those future events? It wouldn't be hard. Matilda shrugged. Some things are inevitable. Besides, what sort of chaos badger would she be if she turned down the chance to test the gods? Kara nodded in agreement, and the elf massaging her scalp looked horrified. She wouldn't, would she? That was insanity. Practically begging for divine retribution. But Dana knew. If there was a chance to find out what a god tasted like, Kara would 100% do it, just to say that she knew the answer. Chapter 12:18 To the pub. Once the men were all worn out from training and sparring, they migrated to the pub to test out the local beverages. The bartender didn't wait for them to ask questions, and poured everyone their first drink as soon as they sat down. He already had a good idea of what everyone liked, based on their orders since they had arrived. The resort was fully booked for the wedding and all-inclusive, so there was no good reason not to give them whatever liquors they were after, or to wait for them to order. Some of the answers were obvious. Spiced rum for the wrath demons, ale for the dwarves. But some were less obvious. The bartender had no idea what humans drank other than wine, but the human smelled part dwarf, so maybe he liked ale? That was what the bartender went with. Even only part dwarf, he should still appreciate Fey Dwarven Ale. Now, the miners at the lithium mine were not unfamiliar with strong drink. They regularly made honey mead and every spring brought a new batch of maple sap rum. But what they were unfamiliar with was a drink as refined as Dwarven Ale. The taste, the lingering magic, the overall effect. Nothing that he had ever tasted before could compare to that first sip. This is absolutely wonderful. I don't even know what it is made of, but we might have to plant some of it near the mines. Jake sighed. The dwarves laughed at his reaction, then nodded in agreement. You would need someone with a bit more training. The Dwarven Ale is a magical brew in the most literal sense. You can't just brew it with conventional equipment. But with the power level of your continent coming up, you might actually be able to find a few that were willing to move in order to establish a new brewery. The ingredients aren't uncommon. They just need the skill to brew it perfectly. The Fey host smiled as they poured everyone's second round of drinks. Yes, even here in the Fey realm, which has entire nations of dwarves, it is hard to find a true brewmaster. Though, as I recall, that was once a class option for your planet. The advantages that the system give to your people are absolutely unfair. One of my cousins went there when she failed out of school, hoping to get enough of a benefit that she could catch up to her peers. One of the dryads serving food agreed. How long ago was that? Carl asked. We were kids, and the timeline between the two worlds doesn't really match. The Fey realm fluctuates differently, but I would guess that it's about 15,000 years ago in your world. He replied. Jake coughed as he choked on his ale. You are 15,000 years old? The dryad shook his head. A little over 9,000. But as I said, the timelines don't match up. In the Fey realm, dryads don't die for as long as their spirit tree survives. As long as they picked a good one, and it doesn't suffer from the bad luck of a fatal lightning strike or other tragedy, the spirit trees usually live for around 10,000 years. One of the smaller flying Fey explained. The server nodded. I am in my last 1,000 now, most likely. My spirit tree is enormous, and has an entire city grown around it. But after so long, the magic begins to fade and change. But I can't complain. I have had a wonderful run of it, and I have completed every task that I wish to try in my life. Jake hummed in confusion. You see, in my home, servers are a lower social status job. So, I would have expected that someone working as one during their later years would have many regrets. The Fey all laughed. None of us are here for the money. They pay us well, but that's not why we are here. Everyone who works here was either born here at the resort, or they came here to fulfill a desire to mingle with new types of people. That's what our dryad friend came here for. Nearly 100 years ago, the little Fey explained. Carl set out a bowl of the honey-infused coconut milk that had been served for the guests who didn't drink, and Tion appeared on the table for a snack. Is that a stone fur divine fox? They're not extinct, the Fae server asked, shocked by the small white ball of fluff. Indeed he is, but they're far from extinct. I have heard of at least a dozen others still living in the Dragon Isles. His den was raided, and the rest of his kin were lost, but there are others left on our world. Carl explained. The small Fae were entranced with Tion, and continually filled the bowl with honey milk until the little fox burped, then sighed and rolled over on his side, milk drunk and sleepy. That was their cue to get out the brushes and start grooming the fluffy little fox. You're after the loose fur, aren't you? Carl asked as he watched the gentle grooming process. The little fairies nodded. It makes wonderful accessories, and divine fox fur will hold nearly any sort of fae or holy magic. Plus, the brushing is like a gentle massage. Tion nodded in agreement. The grooming was really comfortable. Plus, they had given him a cute braided mohawk.
Karl shrugged.
Well, no harm, no foul. It feels like Tion's magic responds well to this place as well. I will have to see if he wants to stay outside so he can absorb Fae realm magic and perhaps understand a bit more of the world. He is still very young, after all. That comment made Thor chuckle. The others in the group had all matured at a vastly accelerated rate, but according to his studies with Tessa, the stone fur fox normally took a century to reach adulthood. So, even if Tion was growing much faster than usual, it would likely take him years before he was even an adolescent. At least in body. His power was growing very well. Chapter 12:19. Stylish. Watching the Fae work was great entertainment as they drank. But the little creatures didn't stop with just Tion. Once the fox was massaged to sleep and groomed to their standard, they started in on the hair and beards of the dwarves, grooming them to perfection. With Fae magic and tiny hands, there were no stray hairs, which would save much time when it was time to prepare everyone for the wedding ceremony. It was set for the next afternoon, as most of the guests could only stay a few days, and the dwarves' beards would hold a braid at least that long without any issues. Who knew that dwarves could be so stylish? Lord Drod asked as the Fae worked to beautify the guests, who were happy to let them do as they pleased as long as this top-quality ale kept coming. Azoth, the immortal regent, laughed. You have no idea. Once upon a time, the hill dwarves had entire clans of raiders who put an immense amount of work into looking impressive. The mountain dwarves were always less concerned with it, and preferred golden accessories to flashy tattoos and war paint. But it is certainly part of dwarven culture. A few of the gathered dwarves chuckled. There were still hill dwarves who wore the old fashions, but the days of hill dwarven raiders were in the distant past. Once the magic had faded from the surface, even the hill dwarves had retreated underground for most of their lives to preserve as much of their magic as they could. That had thoroughly changed their culture. Perhaps we should bring back some of the old traditions. I think that being a bit more fashionable might give people a better impression of the dwarves. Slate joked. The Fae giggled. We have dwarven tattoo artists here, if you want some proper dwarven tattoos. Carl turned to face their conversation. You know, one of the ladies is a witch doctor, and she's got a skill for magical tattoos that grant permanent buffs. You should see if she wants to visit your tattoo artists before she has to return home. I bet that she would love to know the skill. One of the dryads pulsed with magic, and then a second later he smiled. The ladies have 2 volunteers who would like to know how to magical tattoos. The witch doctor called Morgana, and the blood destruction demonic spider called Ray Bloodbath. Carl rolled his eyes, while Tion sleepily giggled. Of course, Ray would be interested in an art that involved stabbing people hundreds of times per second. Even Kara was interested in the art form, not so much because it involved stabbing, though that was fun, but because it was graffiti on living creatures. Kara had zero thoughts of taking paying customers for magical tattoos, but many thoughts of tattooing sedated or paralyzed people with her desired designs. The only thing that was likely to stop her was that it was impossible for her to properly hold a tattoo gun in her natural form, and she still didn't really like being a humanoid. Her current form was cute, but it felt like a disguise, not just an alternate version of herself the way that the others viewed it. Thor particularly loved his human appearance, while Ray viewed hers as more of an indoor stealth form, or a non-combat mode. It was less combat capable than her natural form, but better able to navigate smaller spaces, like the interior of a house. "A toast to the groom," Azov declared, raising his tankard high. "To the groom. May you be the next mythic champion of the Dragon Isles." The men replied, while Karl raised his mug and bowed politely before downing the ale. The men's celebration was much different from the ladies'. While the men got progressively more drunk and told battle stories, the ladies became progressively more pampered and lazy. Dana was quite certain that she didn't have a muscle in her body that held any lingering tension at this point, and her skin was glowing with internal energy in a way that she hadn't even known was possible for a human. Truthfully, it was not. But Dana didn't consider that her advancement had a much more profound effect on her than simply giving her some new skills and changing her beast form. The magic of the divine fox was part of every cell of her body now, intrinsic to her existence. So, while she considered herself 100% human, from the viewpoint of the Fae who were much more sensitive to such changes, that was not even close to correct. And as they were working Fae magic into her body to relax and refresh her, she was beginning to exhibit more and more of the magic of the divine foxes that had been locked away by her human bloodline and a lack of training on how to properly utilize it. Her world had forgotten much during the years since the last resurgence. But the Fae realm didn't suffer from any such phenomenon, and even among the staff, there were many old enough to have been alive during the last resurgence. They knew more about how to express a mixed bloodline properly than humanity had forgotten. For the Chaos Dragon, who had been a friend to the Fae since time immemorial, they would do their very best to make sure that this wedding was a success, and that every single guest gained something from their stay. Whether it was something big or something small did not matter. What mattered was that they brought a touch of the Fae realm back to their own world. It would slowly establish the link between the two again, not through the actual Fae mana, but through the minds of the people. The more welcoming the people were to the Fae, the more easily the barrier between the two worlds could be breached. That was the exponential protection function that had been built into the defenses of the Fae realm. Some worlds would never accept them, and would never be able to cross the barrier. Others could be stepped through with little more than a thought. Chapter 1220, Relaxed Schedule. The drinking and celebrations ran late into the evening, but Karl wasn't too worried. The ceremony didn't begin until mid-afternoon, and the men had a much easier time getting ready than the ladies would. They already had their outfits for the wedding courtesy of Ray. They had their Fae staff members assigned to get them ready for the wedding, and even breakfast was scheduled. So, he didn't feel the least bit guilty about coming into the room well after dark, or about waking Dana up early the next morning to enjoy the private hot spring in their room. A brisk rap at the door was followed by the appearance of 3 small girls in the room. Lotus had brought Button and Misty to help get Dana up and ready. Or perhaps Misty had brought the other 2, given that they didn't use the door but teleported into the suite. "Time to get up and get moving. Oh good, you don't have clothes on, so you don't have to get undressed. We brought special bubbles for the bubble bath, but we have been informed that we are not allowed to use them in the hot springs," Lotus announced. Karl laughed as he got up and equipped a pair of shorts. "I guess it's that time. I will go meet with the gentlemen and begin to prepare. Let me know if you need me to send anyone in to assist." Lotus waved her hand. "Everyone will be here soon enough. It's good that the suite is so big, or we would need to move after the bath." Karl just shook his head in dismay as Dana threw a spare towel at the nature cleric, and then walked to the bath. "Good luck, ladies." Then Karl was off to find breakfast, leaving them to the utter chaos that was wedding day bridal preparations. They were ostensibly finished planning every detail, but now that Ray had seen the staff who worked at the resort, she wanted to change all their uniforms for the wedding. She had been informed twice this morning that it wasn't possible, mostly because the fairies would have panic attacks if you wrapped them in demonic spider silk, but she was determined to find a way around the problem. Unlike the chaos of Dana's preparations, the men's side was nearly military efficiency. When Karl arrived to check the venue, the men had checklists in one hand, breakfast burritos in the other, and they were checking every detail against the plans that Matilda had left for them, or bringing in the final few items that hadn't been part of the resort's inventory. "Gentlemen, is there anything I can help with?" Karl asked. "For now, nothing. Just grab something to eat and then prepare for the barber and the stylist." Lord Drod explained. Dave, Raj and Hugo were all at the table when Carl arrived, wearing casual outfits for the morning. The Chaos Dragon booked the spa for us at noon, so that we will all be ready for the event. Why we need to look good, I am not sure. But we will, Dave explained. Carl chuckled. Are the wife and kids here? Or was it just you on this trip? Kara tried to argue in favor of my wife coming along with the kids, but I made plans for them to go visit her mother instead. Letting the Badgers plot against you never ends well. So when they get too excited about something, you need to make alternate plans for them to get excited about. Dave explained. Hugo chuckled, and Carl noticed that Annabelle, the mythic mage that Ray had given an idol dress, was sitting with Raj. They weren't in the same guild, so that must be his date for the event. Raj winked at Carl when he noticed his look. The invitations included a +1. Hugo has a +1 around here somewhere as well, but I think she's still sleeping. The restaurant where they had chosen to have breakfast was rapidly filling with guests for the wedding, most of whom were either wearing the resort's robes or swim shorts in preparation for a morning at the hot springs before getting ready for the wedding. A quick inspection found that Davis, Ashbringer and Wendy, the Oni apprentice runecrafter, were all sitting at a table in the corner engrossed in conversation, while Mick was up at the buffet, looking torn between fey wine or juice for breakfast. Carl had just finished double-checking that the nameplates for the family members were right when a small group of immortal-ranked men arrived. Totem Carl, congratulations on your wedding. The Supreme Lady invited us. One of the men explained. Ah, welcome, old friends of the Supreme Lady, Carl asked. The immortal chuckled. You could call us something like that. We are all guild masters of the Darklight host on different worlds. That got the attention of everybody. What sort of guild had locations on multiple planets? And for that matter, how did that even work? Was the system not exclusive to their planet? I see that we have caused many more questions than we have answered. Well, I can solve most of those, as it appears that your world has forgotten. The immortal continued. Thank you. Our world just went through a 10,000-year period where the ley lines were too far beneath the surface for most of the world to access the system. So, you could say that it was a rough time for anyone not an immortal. Carl explained. That does sound troublesome. My world has the same issue, but it fluctuates between immortality and mortality. So, during certain periods, it is nearly impossible to become immortal. The others here mostly live on worlds that the World Dragon scattered into the immortal realm. Well, except Dave. Dave moved his whole planet into the immortal realm in a separate space because he got sick of transferring them mana. The immortal that he called Dave chuckled, and Carl checked his name plate with the system interface. Dave O'Carricant. Yeah, he was Dave. That looked much too hard to pronounce in common. It wasn't bad in Draconic, though, and the man was a dragon of some sort. Not a chromatic dragon, though. His magic didn't feel right. Chapter 1221. Immortal Guests. The presence of so many immortals was shocking at first, but now that Carl could see that they were all Darklight host guild masters, it made much more sense. Technically, the system didn't call Matilda the guild master of the Darklight host, only a branch manager. But she was a supreme-ranked existence, so that might just be by choice. The first immortal to speak gestured at the group. These are Dave, Gregor, and Nox. I am Axiom. It's a pleasure to meet you all, especially the fellow Darklight host members. I do have to ask, though, how did you get a blue dragon? Trying to pry them out of the library long enough to do anything is troublesome. Trying to get them to commit to anything that is not learning or teaching is near impossible. Carl chuckled and waved at Sapphire, who had just walked past, headed for his suite. My home world has an abundance of base-class warriors at the moment. I developed a skill that helps them advance to new and improved warrior-type classes. I believe that she hopes giving them new skills and advancing their class will make them less warrior and more suitable to intellectual endeavors. Carl joked. Axiom laughed. It doesn't work. They are still warriors, just with more skills. We tried. Well, they tried. My world uses a slightly different system known as the Wandering Cultivator system, and it doesn't have classes. Every world that the World Dragon influenced with his magic is different, but some are completely unrecognizable in their magic. They still smell like the world dragon's magic, but he simply didn't imbue it with any sort of system that we can identify. Annabelle frowned. How do you know the world dragon is a he? It's been a running debate between me and Hugo for years. Axiom laughed. I met him and his wife. It's one of the advantages of being old. Sometimes you get to meet the gods in person if you are powerful enough. The world dragon is definitely male. Hugo just shrugged. It was hard to argue with that. No deep and philosophical text, no ancient records. Just, I met him one time. Nox, the Immortal Guild leader with long black hair and a narrow face, chuckled. My mother is a demigod-ranked priestess following the goddess of life and fertility, the bunny god. She often has visions of the gods, and I agree with his assessment. The world dragon is not just a masculine influence, that one was definitely a man before he was a divinity. Annabelle made a note and then nodded. Is your father a cleric as well? Nox shook his head. My father failed his tribulation and never made it to immortality. He passed on to his next lives a little over 1,000,000 years ago, by Fey realm reckoning. The mythic ranked mage looked shocked. So, there is someone older than the Supreme Lady? And in the same guild, no less. Nox frowned. I'm not that old. Or perhaps she counts her years differently. By the Fey realm's timeline, she is definitely older than I am. She was a guild master when I joined, and I was mortal then. Then he turned to look to the side. She's upset that I called her old. I am going to have to make her an apology gift later. He sighed. Distract her with the Chaos Badger. She won't stay upset for long. Cal Visperet. The guests laughed quietly at the suggestion. Putting Matilda and Cara together was bound to be entertaining, even when they thought that they were behaving. I don't suppose that you can spare a few minutes for practical questions before the wedding, can you? My world is rather short on immortals to ask questions. Carl asked. Of course. We have all the time in the world. You only have about 2 hours, but we have got plenty of time. Axiom joked. This will naturally be about gaining immortality. It always is. Dave agreed. Carl nodded. Really, it's mostly about the power matrix. I get the concept of needing to master a fundamental rule to advance, and that I need to improve the matrix to channel the energy needed. But do I have to alter it in more than just the quantity of points and design when I get to mythic rank? The mythic ranked guests waited intently for some sort of answer as the immortals inspected Carl's aura and probed his soul for the current state of his progress. Your soul strength and mental forging are both progressing well. I see a 72-point chaos element focus, but you appear to be mastering the mana manipulation fundamental rule. If you don't improve your chaos rule affinity as well, you're going to run into problems when you get close to tribulation. Probably. Or maybe not. Chaos is fickle like that. Sometimes it causes things to go smoothly for no apparent reason at all. Like when the Supreme Lady reached the Supreme rank. She announced that she needed to understand something, then went to an incubus brothel for the night and came back at the Supreme rank. Guild Master Dave noted. The other immortals simply stared at him. That couldn't be true. But it wasn't impossible. Nox nodded as he finished his inspection. I think that the major limiting factor will be your understanding. If you can master a fundamental rule, you shouldn't have any real issues with the tribulation. Your mental strength and power matrix are both up to the bare minimum standard to survive. Axiom nodded. My world is different, but I would say that you should be able to reach the tribulation with appropriate resources using your current cultivation method. Or in your current class, as it were. If you don't advance your class far enough to be compatible with an immortal rank skill, you will get stuck along the way. I don't know if you have one that will advance that far, but if you're bonded to that divine fluffball, you should be fine. His healing and earth manipulation skills can both reach the immortal rank. That was excellent news, Tian decided. Someone had confirmed that he really could be an immortal. He just needed some time and the right opportunities. And one of those pixies to come back and scratch that itch on his left ear. Chapter 12:22. Cultural Differences. Almost as if they could actually hear him. One of the pixies did come back to stroke his head and smooth the fur on Tian's ear, while the immortals watched with bemused smiles. This stone-fur divine fox was clearly an orphan, they decided. The species was a proud one, and the mere notion of allowing the Fae to braid their fur, much less to pet their head, would have sent most divine foxes into a rage. But Tion? He liked his new row of braids, and he was thoroughly enjoying the scalp massage. Getting nervous yet? Lord Drod asked Carl, who was sipping coffee and watching the chaos around the room. Nope. Excited but not nervous yet. I've been looking forward to this for some time now, and it's going to be quite a relief to have the bond solidified and confirmed by all these guests. Carl replied. Behind him, Thor chuckled. Exactly, you can't be letting the Dana Mage escape now. That shouldn't be a concern for much longer. With all of us here today, who would dare to say that they didn't know that was Carl's wife? Anyone who tried to steal your Dana Mage away probably wouldn't live to regret it. Unless the first one to catch them was the Badger. Lord Drod agreed. The immortals and demons laughed, but a few of the others, including Carl's father, looked confused. Is the Badger actually the merciful one? He asked. Oh, not at all. But while Ray or most of the men here would simply kill them and put them out of their misery, Kara would make sure that they lived in the most horrific way possible. Though letting Remy catch them might have the same effect. She's constantly looking for test subjects for experimental alchemy concoctions, and some of those are bound to have less than desirable outcomes. Carl explained. Jake frowned for a second, trying to remember which one was Remy. Oh, the Naga. She seems to be popular, but I don't speak Naga. He realized. Well, you might be able to understand her now that you've awakened a class. The system usually translates for us. Carl explained. Lord Drod nodded. If you can understand me, then you can probably understand her as well. It's the same system function. Jake nodded. I can. It's a strange thing, knowing that your words are being translated, but I certainly understand that language. That will be very helpful to you in the future, as there are a number of monster species that have spoken languages, and if you're defending your hometown after you gain some power, you will be able to hear them strategizing. One of the immortals agreed. Carl chuckled. And most of them are too stupid to realize that you can hear them, so they go ahead with the plan as soon as they're finished making it. Does your world have an antagonistic relationship with the Titan clans as well? Axiom asked. Carl nodded. With all species of giants, really, they're just not easy to get along with. My home nation, where my father still lives, just finished a war against the giant clans, and the Titan clan is causing trouble on another continent, trying to suppress the system. They're just generally a nuisance to every other species. Axiom sighed. All these years, and they're still holding a grudge. I suspect that it is personal between their gods and ours, and that is why they simply can't let it go and get along with any other species. I can see that your world gets along better with the demons than most other worlds, but that could be the human influence. Humans love to pick sides in the demons versus seraphim wars. They're almost like the orcs that way, itching for a good fight. Everyone in the room nodded in agreement. The humans did love a good fight. Not as much as the orcs, but they were getting there. And they did get along surprisingly well with the demons. We also have a lot of beastkin among our population, and they form a sort of buffer between the dragons, the humans, and the demons. On my home world, it's not uncommon for species to mix. Take Deeve, for example. He's got a bit of owl beastkin in his lineage, and his wife is a badger-type beastkin. Lyric, the little one chasing the green dragon priestess and the forest dragon around, is half-elven. Carl explained with a smile. Axiom winked at Gregor, the quietest of the Darklight Host Guild leaders, and then began to laugh. That's a human trait everywhere. Gregor has a theory that half the species only exist because humanity can't keep it in their pants. Take Lamia, for example. What sort of genetic evolution would have naturally led to that form? A fully human upper body with a snake lower body? That's unlikely to be natural. More likely, one parent was either a serpentine demon or a magical beast who got involved with humans. It would also explain why all Lamia are female. The genetics only matched up on the X chromosome, so males were impossible. Or some human magic user with a fetish ensured that all offspring of his pairing would be female. Lord Drod snorted in amusement. I wouldn't put either one past them. My thoughts were always that the Lamia and some others might have been a result of the Chaos Dragons getting bored. But them being created by horny humans left unattended makes sense. Lyric stepped into the room and giggled. So, this is what men talk about when they're alone with each other. Were there any more of the raspberry pancakes left? We've only got blueberry left in the kitchen. Carl nodded and pointed to the side of the room, where the buffet was still fully stocked. Breakfast is still being served out here. But if she's driving everyone insane, bring Button out here, and we will keep her entertained. Carl suggested. It won't interrupt men's time? Lyric asked. Not at all. Besides, there are plenty of women here as well. Not everyone is part of the bridal party, and they wouldn't all fit in the suite anyhow. Chapter 1223, Bridal Walk. And that was how lunch arrived and Button had to be removed from Lord Drod, who had been letting the forest dragon ride on his shoulders so that she could see more of what was going on around the room. Button needed to be cleaned and dressed before the wedding, as she had been nominated by Matilda to help scatter flower petals down the aisle before the bride entered. That was the perfect job for a bored forest dragon, who could create even more flowers on her own if she happened to run out. She had to be physically restrained from going into practice, just so that the floor didn't have half a meter of flower petals on the floor when Dana had to walk down the aisle. It took a bit of explanation from the staff, but eventually Button understood that only the bride was supposed to step on the petals, so she had to wait until everyone else was seated. Carl retreated to a dressing room to change and get ready for the ceremony, and found that there was an entire group of professionals waiting there for him. Well, professionals and one spectral knight, who was holding up the white tuxedo with a black shirt that Ray had chosen for Carl to wear to his wedding. Once the suit was handed over, the spectral knight vanished, and the others got to work. Carl was lotioned, trimmed, brushed, and oiled to perfection over the next hour, and then he got dressed in the fancy suit and the staff nodded in satisfaction. Sir, you are ready. There are 15 minutes left before you are needed on the stage. Supreme Lady Matilda will guide you through the process, but you only actually need to say 2 words, and then she will perform the binding ceremony. The Dryad man in charge of Carl's preparation explained. Perfect timing then. Let's go. Now, he was beginning to feel the nerves, and to wonder why Matilda hadn't seen fit to tell him anything at all about the details of his own wedding. It was exquisite, and she hadn't missed any detail that he might have thought of, but it was a bit odd to have someone just look at the future to see your reactions instead of asking you. Carl followed the staff through the resort to the chosen location for the ceremony, and then realized that the whole wall of the room actually folded down to form an extended platform out over the cliffs, giving them a waterfall background with massive fay trees and hot springs. Carl realized that everyone in the room was primarily in black, but with differing accent colors that were actually color-coded to how they were related to Carl and Dana. Guild mates and alliance members were in black and white. Family were in black and green, matching Dana's eyes. Friends and other guests were in black and red, matching the flowers that had been placed all over the room. Carl greeted everyone again as they entered the room and found their seats, then went to the stage to wait with Thor and his father, who would be serving as his groomsmen for the ceremony. Tion was sitting on Thor's shoulder, and Hawk was perched in the trees outside. Even Opal had come out, and the butterfly was sitting in the rafters of the room, committing everything to memory using a dozen illusionary clones of herself. The Fae thought that it was hilarious, as they were already recording the event. But when Opal showed them her version, which used solid illusions and not just a projected image of the scene, they were deeply impressed with her sense of showmanship. Matilda and Ray were the last to enter, with Matilda taking a spot behind the Master of Ceremonies, along with the other immortals, while Ray joined Remy and Kara, who was in humanoid form for a change, in the bridesmaids' positions. A gentle tune, reminiscent of birdsong and chirping foxes in a windy forest, began to play. That was the signal for Button to enter, happily scattering flowers by the handful from a basket that never seemed to get empty. When she reached the front, she hopped in the lap of Dana's mother, ignoring the empty seat that was reserved for her. Carl smiled at the interaction and wondered if they were going to end up adopting a forest dragon to live in the guild house, or if they were going to send Dana's mother to live with the druids in the tiny world. It wouldn't be a bad option for her. But then the music changed, and everyone turned expectantly to see the bride's grand entrance. Elven trumpets sounded, and curtains parted, revealing Dana in all her bridal glory. Her flowing red gown was covered in golden embroidery, and her hair was covered in delicate ornaments, with a translucent red veil over her face as she carefully paced down the aisle. Each step was deliberate and measured, but with the long gown and her movement skills, it looked more like she was floating down the aisle over a lake of flower petals. Once she reached the end of the aisle, Dana circled the front of the stage to take her spot facing Carl, and the room broke into raucous cheering. After a moment, it quieted, and the master of ceremonies began to speak. "Welcome, guests of the myriad mortal worlds. We have gathered here today to join this couple in most holy matrimony, under the sight of the combined pantheons. With their blessing we shall proceed." He began. Then the sky shone bright with golden holy light, and Carl realized why they had held the ceremony with the sky visible. Which god or goddess had decided to shine their light on the wedding, Carl couldn't tell. He simply lacked the ability to discern the personal differences in holy power. But he could feel it deep in his bones. Dana sighed as the holy energy soaked into her body, and the master of ceremonies smiled in satisfaction. "The gods have confirmed the integrity of this bond. Now we shall begin," he announced. Chapter 12:24 Wedding Ceremony. The master of ceremonies cleared his throat and a polished wooden staff appeared in his hand, made of some sort of silver wood, and carved to resemble a lounging dragon who held a large blue orb in its jaws. Carl could see that the orb was actually a globe, though not of their world, and when he inspected it more closely, he realized that there was an actual planet-sized tiny world inside the orb and set to be visible from the outside. The ancient elf released the staff, and it remained upright on its own, glowing with power. "The gods honor the petition of this man Carl, and this woman Dana, to be joined for eternity. Do you, Carl, offer yourself to this union freely and wholeheartedly, with true love and devotion?" "I do." "Do you, Dana, offer yourself to this union freely and wholeheartedly, with true love and devotion?" "I do." Then the master of ceremonies began to chant in a language that Carl didn't recognize. It had a haunting familiarity, like he should know it, but the words were pure power as the old elf wove a spell. Then the magic of his words merged with the magic of the staff, covering the bride and groom in a gentle halo of golden light. "What is this? I don't recall this in the briefing Matilda gave me." Dana's thoughts entered Carl's mind. "Score! We have a Dana mage." Kara mentally cheered, which made Dana turn to look at her. She was beginning to panic, but Carl took her hands to focus her attention. "It's a mental link. Relax, this is normal," he gently explained. "Normal for you. I can hear everything," she replied as the power of the magic surged. Power began to flow between the two of them, sending a pleasant tingle through Carl's muscles. But to Dana, it was like her whole world was being forcefully realigned, and her soul was tossed through a sea of holy magic and chaos with only Carl's touch as an anchor. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the process was over, and Dana felt her mana begin to change. It took on a bit of the chaotic essence of Carl's power, and the power level began to grow rapidly until it hit a bottleneck and pressure built for a few seconds. Then, the pressure popped, and Dana felt herself pulled into the totem rank and forcefully propelled toward the peak, getting closer to Carl's power level by the second. The soul bonding is complete. This man Carl and this woman Dana have been forever merged by the will of the gods. From this day forward, their souls will be bound as one, together for eternity. The master of ceremonies announced. "You may now kiss the bride." The feel of Carl's lips sent desire surging through Dana's body. But it was not all her own. She could feel his thoughts and emotions, including his amusement at her panic, like he wasn't also experiencing this ceremony for the first and only time. For a moment, her mind went blank, devoid of anything but Carl and the feel of his body against hers. Then she was abruptly pulled back to reality by the realization that they were practically making out in public, while the crowd cheered. A gentle thump at Carl's chest made him break the kiss, and he turned to the crowd, raising their joined hands in victory. Button began throwing flower petals in the air in celebration, and the immortals moved to stand behind them. Matilda motioned to the crowd for silence, and after a moment, it was quiet enough that she could speak. The ceremonies of the old gods are simple but powerful. We thank the representative of the ancients for agreeing to host the bonding ceremony today. But the Darklight host has one more tradition. As a group blessing, we ask that everyone in the resort focus a stream of mana on the Master of Ceremonies staff. Matilda explained. Then she stepped back and led by example, putting a massive amount of mana into the artifact. Then the other immortals joined in, as did the guests. The amount of flowing power was even more incredible than what had happened during the bonding ceremony. So when Axiom stepped forward to shape the effect, Carl did wonder if he would actually be capable. His world didn't have the same sort of system that the others did, with a class that smoothly progressed, or levels that could be easily measured. Instead, it had a form of cultivation with milestones and tribulations that you had to surpass. In a way, that was similar to how the mages of Carl's world organized themselves before the system resurgence, but all thought of power rankings vanished the moment that Axiom actually began to shape the effect. Two glowing golden images appeared, identical to Carl and Dana, right down to their current pose. Then, when they were so clearly defined that they looked like solid gold and not pure energy, they floated forward and merged with the bride and groom. Axiom hummed happily as searing pain shot through Carl's body, and all his beasts froze in shock. That spell was changing the Carl on the most fundamental of levels, remaking his body in preparation for something. Dana's thoughts said that she was confused by Carl's response, but Axiom's smirk told her what she needed to know. The effect was on both of them, but the pain of the transformation had been completely channeled to Carl so that she didn't have to undergo it. Place your hands on the staff and complete the circuit. Let the power flow through you, and you will complete the Golden Core Divine Refinement, Axiom declared. A grand name, to be sure, but a fundamental stage of the path to immortality under his world system, and one that made it immeasurably easier to survive the divine tribulation. Carl and Dana placed their free hands on the staff, letting the power flow through them, and the excess cycle back to the orb. That eased the pain of the overflow, and Carl smiled as he began to feel bonds breaking on his power. He was very, very close to the mythic bottleneck, and now that he was bonded with Dana, so was she. Chapter 1225, Refinement. The Golden Core Divine Refinement was not a fast process. It continued for nearly 5 minutes as the guests and Fae staff of the resort continued to add mana to the staff. Then, the mythic bottleneck completely vanished, and Carl felt himself advancing as if it had never existed. The quality of his physique had been refined to such a degree that even advancing to the mythic rank no longer held any restrictions for him. The change was as easy as breathing. It felt like the world had suddenly become lighter, or his strength had increased to an incredible degree, so that all considerations of physical limits no longer mattered. It was a heady feeling, and Carl saw the smile on Dana's fingers as she advanced, and the effect of the refinement faded. Congratulations, Carl and Dana. You have completed the Golden Core Divine Refinement, a secret technique of the Darklight Host Guild. Now, eternity really is within your reach, Axiom announced. The crowd was in awe. What sort of insane guild wedding gift was that? A gift of smooth progression to immortality? The wedding had brought Dana from the Overlord to the mythic rank in a matter of minutes, which was insane enough on its own. But the foreign guild master had suggested that was not the extent of their gift and blessing. It had sounded more like a side effect of the gift. Dana's makeup was smudged by tears of joy, and Kara mentally sighed. See, this is why I wanted to do it in fox form. The happy tears just ruin makeup, she complained. That made Dana smile and pat the transformed badger on the head. It is going to take some time to get used to having all these extra thoughts in my head, she whispered. I will teach you how to ignore them if you want, but it's more fun to listen in on their squabbles and daily life. Carl agreed. Matilda pulled them both into a hug, and then whispered in Carl's ear. What do you think of my present? It wouldn't have worked right if we weren't in the Fae realm, where it's possible to achieve divinity directly from mortality. Now you're bound to your bride just as surely as your beasts. Carl smiled at the Chaos Dragon. But we still don't have a Dana space. That made both Dana and Matilda chuckle. Just give it time. One more separate space spell, and you can make one dedicated just to your Dana. Carl shook his head. Instead, I will help her gain immortality and teach her tiny world, so that not only can I give her forever, I can give her the world as well. Kara giggled and mentally congratulated him. 10 out of 10, best sappy line so far. Dana didn't have time to reprimand the errant badger, as there were guests coming up to give their congratulations and hand over gifts. That gave Kara time to escape, but Carl knew that she would be back, as she had her own present ready to give to Dana. All of the beasts had prepared something. Ray made the wedding dress, which was impressive on its own, and that had started a competition among the beasts. Opal was preparing a replay montage of all the touching moments of their relationship, but Tessa had stopped her when the butterfly wanted to give a demonstration this morning. The parts that Opal found most interesting were not suitable to be displayed to the public. So, she was making a recording of everything instead. One that Dana could replay at will and watch from any angle, including from her own point of view. That should be a good present, Opal decided. Thor had consulted with Tessa, and they had decided to go for a much more practical route. They had chosen to go out and get the couple a rare tome on cultivating mental power, which was rumored to have come from a different world. Both the bride and the groom could use it if it were real. So, by Tessa's determination, it was a solid wedding gift. This wedding in particular was a tricky one, as the usual gifts of jewelry for the bride would never do. Carl could make better than what they could offer, and it was simply tactless to gift a craftsman the things that he made for himself. So, instead the gifts were mostly in the form of rare items. Rare materials and rare books especially. Carl wasn't sure who was going to be more pleased with this wedding, Dana or Sapphire. They certainly had a lot of magical tomes. As the gift-giving wound down, Hawk returned to perch on the edge of the platform with a smug sense of superiority in his mind. He had found the perfect gift. While they were in Xylaz, he had flown out over the lake and found the most wonderful mythic-ranked fish. It had taken some work to defeat the accursed thing, but he had, and now it was a special dinner for the Dana Mage's induction ceremony. Hawk wasn't exactly clear on what the purpose of a wedding was, but as far as he could discern, it was like the party that they threw for a new member of the Beasts, except that she didn't get a dedicated Dana space. That was a shame. He really liked his space. The food was brought out, while the band started to set up for the party afterward. They were going to need as much energy as they could get for the festivities, as everyone intended to make the very most of their vacation and dance until the sun came up, then return to the spa for a rest day. Not all of them could stay for an extended vacation, so many of them were headed home after only a single day of fun. That was somewhat expected, but now that they were at the resort, it seemed like a real shame. Chapter 12:26. Reception. Carl enjoyed the soft sound of fey harps as they finished their dinner, sitting at a table with Dana and the Immortals. Or you could look at it as the leaders of the Darklight host. Which brought up a good question. Matilda, why don't you have the Guild Master title? You're listed as the Psyhosesa branch leader, but you're clearly the most powerful member of the Darklight host on the planet. Carl asked. The Chaos Dragon smirked. When there is a proper Guild Master, the Darklight host gains a guild skill based on the leader's abilities. Every member of the guild gains that one skill at their own rank as a benefit of being in a divine guild. Can you imagine what would happen if I was actually named as the Guild Master? If anything, we should probably name Orthos as the Guild Master, just so that we get something resembling a normal guild skill. Even if we made you Guild Master, we would probably get something weird. Make her do it. I need to know the answer. Kara mentally demanded. Matilda smirked in her direction, and Carl knew that the dragon had heard the Chaos Badger's thoughts. Dana chuckled. I think that it could be funny to name Carl. Is it automatic, or does he get to pick one of his skills? Because with his abilities, he could likely create a good one for the guild. The Immortals smirked. It's automatic, chosen by the World Dragon. But it's always one of your more uncommon skills. If anything, it might be one of his defensive abilities, and that would be quite the guild buff. But if it was something like his ability to advance skills? Or to allow divine beasts to pick a bonded partner? Can you imagine the reaction of the public if all of our guild members could do that? Nox stroked his beard and nodded sagely. You would have to pry the green dragon clerics off with a troll. That was an odd phrasing, and the immortal noticed Carl's confused look. Kilo for kilo, trolls are one of the strongest monsters in the world. So many in my world use them as a standard. If you're stronger than a troll at your own rank, you're gifted. But we only have mountain trolls on my world. There aren't any of the other ones like the cute forest trolls or the bridge trolls, he explained. Gregor nodded. Trolls are helpful. I hire a bunch of them to guard doors and bridges. They're excellent at it. The Fey hosts chuckled. Trolls love to guard things, to the point that one of the species had been named bridge trolls because of their intensely protective instincts. They didn't just live under the bridge, they collected tolls, did maintenance, and prevented anyone from damaging the structure. Whether they actually turned the tolls over to anyone was questionable at best. But nobody would ever accuse a bridge troll's bridge of being unsafe to cross. If you ignored the danger from the troll, the music of the harps changed, and a staff member stepped to the microphone. Would the bride and groom please come to the dance floor for the first dance? This should be interesting, Carl thought. Neither of them was a skilled dancer, though they were both agile. But when they stepped on the floor, the Fae cast a spell on them, and a set of dance moves smoothly entered their memory. A very provocative dance. The music changed to an upbeat rhythm, and Carl swung Dana into the dance as she giggled and kept pace as he spun, twirled, and rubbed against her. The tango was the traditional Fae mating ball dance, so that was the one that they assumed would be right for the first dance of the married couple, and Carl couldn't say that they were wrong. Unlike the slow and formal sort of dancing, this was actually a fun one, and no less intimate, though in a different way than staring soulfully into your partner's eyes as you slowly danced. The first dance ended, and the dance floor filled with guests, while Carl's father came to take Dana's hand and Dana's mother joined Carl for a dance. Wendy was a surprisingly good dancer, Carl realized. There was no worry of stepping on toes, though the dance was much more subdued than the last one. Partially because if he twirled her around like he did Dana, he was likely to dislocate her shoulder or twist her ankle. Some moves were simply not intended for the average human to perform without training. The next dance went to Ray, who managed to sneak ahead of everyone else who was waiting for the song to end. I want the fun dance, she demanded. Got it. Carl nodded to the band members, who smirked and then picked up the tempo of the music so that Carl could spin and twirl with Ray through the song. Or most of the song because Lotus couldn't wait until it ended before she wanted someone to spin her. So, Carl traded partners and Ray claimed Button to spin the little dragon who didn't actually have any idea how to dance with a partner. Carl took a quick break for drinks in between dances and watched the chaos as the guests mingled. Being from not just different regions and continents but also from different planets, all of their wedding customs were different, so everyone just went with whatever the idea was, and Kara was busy making up new wedding traditions on the fly just to get people to do fun stuff. There was a conga line attempting to salsa dance on one side of the room, while someone had started a drinking competition between demons and dwarves on the other. But there was no fighting, which was a good start. Slowly, everyone was beginning to get tired, and Carl noticed that a few of the guests had vanished with the Fae staff members, though he suspected that Lotus did not have lewd intentions. She was probably in the kitchen. Chapter 12:27. Sleeping in. Dana rubbed her temples as she walked out of the shower late that night, wearing nothing but a towel and dripping water on the floor. Toss me a healing spell, would you? I drank way too much, she complained. 12 straight hours of shots after a double advancement wasn't a good idea? Carl joked as he watched Tion's healing magic flow over her. Ah, thank you. We should have given up hours ago. Dana sighed. Carl nodded. That is true. It's after midnight already, and one of us should probably be up to say goodbye to the guests who are leaving after lunch tomorrow. Carl picked Dana up in one arm and peeled the towel off her with a smirk. I think we can spare at least a few more minutes, though. Carl woke up the next morning to fox ears flicking at his face as Dana dreamed about something entertaining. He didn't bother to move, though he could see that it was late in the morning, by the sun through the curtains. They weren't actually in any sort of rush, At least not until it was time that guests were getting ready to head home. That was a moment that came far too soon, and Dana had to hurry to shower so that they could get dressed and say farewell to the guests. Carl was not being helpful. While he was supposedly in the shower to help get them both clean faster, that was not at all what his actions suggested, and by the time that they finally made it to the lobby, Matilda was almost ready to open the portals and start letting everyone head home. "Sorry for the delay, we were a bit slow getting going this morning. Is everyone headed out early?" Carl asked. Matilda nodded. "Other than the ones who are going to the tiny world, who are already there." Carl quickly checked the separate space and found that the rest of his guild members, plus Dana's mother, were all in the tiny world. He had been so busy lately that he had hardly had time to even speak to them at his own wedding. But they didn't seem like they had a bad time. Everyone was excitedly discussing the amenities of the Fae Resort and making plans to find a way to come back here again in the future. It would be an expensive vacation, but they all got paid well. Carl hugged his mother as Matilda opened the portal back to the Golden Dragon Nation. He could see the academy through the portal, and from there it would be easy enough to get his parents back to their house. The academy had plenty of mages, but Carl suspected that there would be government leaders who wanted to ask questions before his parents went home. After all, a destination wedding that took them out of the world entirely was certainly something that the government would want some answers about. "I don't know how long it will be before I see you again, but I will try to make it sometime soon," Carl whispered, then activated, "Follow me, little one." Champion Carl offers knowledge, skill, mystic cooking. Will be transferred to the wallflower Mary Eleanor. Her eyes went wide, and Carl winked at her, then let his father usher her through the portal. He would find out in about 5 seconds that she had just activated the system interface, but he was going to be immediately questioned about the same thing, so there was no harm in keeping them together for this part of their return trip. "You let Kara influence you too much," Dana whispered. "I think it's funny, too," Ray whispered in Dana's ear. "Damn it. You always manage to sneak up on me. Even now that I've actually got the advantage in power level, you still do it." Dana grumbled. Ray smiled back at her. "Thank you. I appreciate the compliment." Dana rolled her eyes. Of course, Ray would take that as a compliment. She had no awareness that people might not want to be startled, and she had very little sense of personal space. "Shall we all prepare to head back to the guild house?" With this advancement, I'm sure that the Guild Alliance will be eager to find out how our skills stack up at mythic rank, Carl asked. Dana smiled. "That's a good point. But with none of the beasts at mythic rank, you'll be at a disadvantage for some time." Carl chuckled and Dana shrugged. "Well, a disadvantage compared to your usual combat strength, anyhow. With your abilities, I suppose that it wouldn't really be a disadvantage versus the average raiding team member. Do you think that Remy will be able to do what she did for totem rank and find a potion to help everyone break through?" She amended. Carl shook his head. "I think that we simply don't have the proper materials for it. She's been trying because it would not only make her super famous, but it would also make a large portion of the world want her potions. I don't think that it will take them long to reach mythic rank, though. Now that my energy is at mythic rank, and the improved power matrix has improved the refinement speed of my energy, they'll be bathing in much higher energy density spaces before long, and that is bound to force at least 1 or 2 advancements. Ray already has what she needs for her advancement bath as well. Not perfect, as ideally, she would want a bit of immortal essence to reach the mythic rank, but it's fully possible with just mythic-ranked ingredients." Dana smiled at the thought of Ray getting upset that her bath wasn't up to her standards, when it was full of mythic-ranked blood. Of all the things that someone could be accused of, Ray would never be accused of not being discerning enough about her skincare routine, or about her fashion sense. Ironic, really. The bloodbath spider becoming a haute couture fashionista was not on anyone's checklist when she first arrived at the academy as a dinner plate-sized baby spider. Chapter 1228. Sort the Portals. Their first stop was the Alliance House in Xylaz so that they didn't have to immediately deal with the panic it would cause the people of Drod when they reappeared at mythic rank. Here, the rank was incredibly common, but there it was just the Lord who held the rank. They were not going to escape the celebrations, though. Common enough that most guilds had a few didn't mean that it wasn't a huge accomplishment, or an elite powerhouse. The house had already been decorated, and all of the mythic members of the Alliance had gathered to congratulate them, along with some of the totems who knew Carl or his team. So, how long until we can expect a mythic ranked beast raiding team? Nilla asked as he raised a glass of blood wine in greeting. Not long now. I know that some of the team members are going to struggle to make the advancement, but we will find a way to work with that. Worst case scenario, I might have to find a new friend for the team so that our totem rank capped members can retire from the raiding team. Carl replied, Is that even an option? I know that they can stay outside when you are away, but can they actually retire? Nilla asked, confused. Carl shrugged. There aren't any restrictions on what they do on their own time. They'll still be linked to their space, so they will be getting stronger when they're near me. But there is no need for them to be on every trip to the dungeon. In fact, they can actually go along with different teams. Often in the past, Thor would go along with Tessa and the others so that he could work as their tank. The vampire smiled. Well, that's certainly an option. If any of them have golem summoning abilities other than Lady Ray, they would almost be a raiding team on their own. Carl shrugged. Well, Remy has her bodyguards, but other than that, none of them have been compatible with the skill. We were hoping that Kara might be, but no such luck. The Chaos Badger did learn to make illusionary copies of herself, though. The vampire stared at him in horror. More of them? One Chaos Badger was already more than one city needed. Hawk was staring suspiciously at Kara as she napped in her space. He remembered the setup and the absolutely unfair level of fuckery that was her advancement to totem rank. He wouldn't put it past her to do it again, just because Carl was going on an adventure without her. Not that she actually needed the advancement. She didn't care about the damage she did most of the time, only that it was entertaining. The staff brought out drinks, and Carl let everyone out of the tiny world to come and relax in the house. The druids had been working hard to maintain the ecosystem, and they deserved to be part of the party. As the ladies filtered out of the portal to join the celebration, Carl noticed one out-of-place soul within his tiny world. Nacht? What are you doing here? The black dragon grumbled as he stepped out of the portal. Did we not specifically ask you to leave the baby dragons alone? Carl patted Button's head. But baby dragons like me. The black dragon pinched the bridge of his nose and closed his eyes to focus his thoughts. I will help you find someone to look after the eggs. He relented. Already on it. I asked Tessa to send a message to the Red Dragon clerics so we can get some caretakers in the tiny world. The ladies are doing a wonderful job incubating them, but they're not trained to raise baby dragons. Carl explained. And where will you even put them? Right where they are? It's a perfect living condition for them, so there's really no need to move them until they're grown up enough to start going out on their own. Carl offered. I thought that you might say that. Nacht complained. Raj laughed at the interaction. I don't think that I've ever actually seen a black dragon frustrated before. I wonder what the Carl is going to do with a baby dragon that is giving even him headaches. Naksha giggled and leaned over to whisper the answer. He found 100 and some dragon eggs when he was out on a mission, and plans to have his friends raise them. The warrior looked bemused. Baby dragons raised by Lotus and a Chaos Badger? Oh, I'm in for this. Nacht glared at him. Don't give them ideas. I will ensure that there is a responsible and trained caretaker sent to look after the hatchlings. Button ran over to give the black dragon a hug. You're going to bring us more friends? I knew that you were secretly not so scary. Lyric bopped the dragon on her head. He means he wants to send over a teacher who will keep you from playing all day and make you actually do your school lessons. Button gave Nacht a suspicious look. He wouldn't dare. Nacht gave her an unimpressed look, and the forest dragon frowned. He's looking at me like he would, but surely dragons aren't that evil. I collect the chicken eggs on time every day. What more do they want of me? Button whined. Can you read? Nacht asked. A little bit, but I have a plan for that. The Carl can teach skills, so he can teach me to read with a head pat, and then I don't need school. Button replied proudly. The room burst into laughter at the little dragon's logic. Baby dragons were baby dragons, even when they were forest dragons, it seemed. Then Button turned to Lotus for reinforcements, and everyone knew that she was fighting for a lost cause. If her best hope for escaping responsibility was the Green Dragon Cleric, then Nacht would already have someone available who knew how to keep her in line. The church had centuries of practice with Lotus and her kin, after all. Lotus offered Button a sippy cup of juice and a cupcake, and the little dragon vanished into the kitchen to eat, leaving the mythic rank visitors chuckling. Maybe they didn't need a new person at all. Lotus had Button figured out. Chapter 1229. Everyone's invited. The mana here is nice. Did you cast some sort of protective spell on the house? Lyric asked as she watched Lotus and Button vanish into the kitchen. More than one. But part of the mana here is that it's next to the lake, which puts off a huge amount of elemental mana that mingles with the leaking mana from the dungeons. Carl explained. Lyric nodded. I have no idea what that means, but I like it. Explaining to the elf that the area around a dungeon always had higher concentrations of mana, and that with so many mythic rank dungeons in the area, Xylaz was a virtual heaven for mana users, could be done later. For now, don't worry about it. Let's party and celebrate a pair of mythic advancements. I'm sure that the rest of the Alliance will be glad to hear it, even if just because Dana has 3 different types of golems. Carl joked. Raj snapped his fingers. That's right. I heard that you knew a new golem spell. Do the blue dragons know yet? Dana laughed and pointed at Sapphire, who was smirking at them. The librarian had already pleaded for Dana to make skill books for all the special skills and class skills that she knew so that they could advance more mages into battle mage-related tracks. Dana might focus more on her golems and ranged combat, but her class was actually exceptionally melee-capable. You could call it a side effect of being surrounded by good friends that she never needed to go forward to hold the line, and that nothing ever got through to attack the healers in the back with her. But the end result was the same. The golems used her blade skills more than she did. You have a point. Not only did they make mythic, but they're newlyweds. Did you have plans for a honeymoon vacation? Hugo asked. Carl shrugged at the big mage. Well, we tried a vacation while we were on a mission for Matilda, but that turned out to be more work than vacation. So, perhaps we will lounge around the house for a bit. Perhaps spend time in the tiny world so there are fewer distractions. Now that I'm at the mythic rank, I can likely expand that tiny world even more again, giving us more room to roam. But I'm not in a hurry to do that yet. A whole week without getting out of bed except to eat sounds good to me. Hugo nodded. And then when you get out, you'll have a whole load of equipment requests to catch up on, and demands that you make another trial tower. Word of the one that you made for the Golden Dragon Nation is spreading fast, and everyone wants one. Carl frowned. How would they even learn about it here? None of the people from the Dragon Isles had been present when he made the tower. Did you think that the church was isolated? Dragons love nothing more than gossip. Every cleric from the Dragon Church knew that you were getting married. They all know that you're mythic now, and that you made a sort of repeatable trial tower for the Golden Dragon Nation with golems and illusions to fight. Hugo explained, and all the clerics put on their best innocent faces. Even Sapphire shrugged, as if to say that it wasn't her fault, just something inevitable. Carl sighed. Then I suppose I should think of a place to put a new one. Sapphire waved her hand dismissively. No need for that. Let them argue, and someone will come tell you the decision eventually. The dragon gods and beast gods' adherents are having a discussion about it now. The dragons already have one, but it's at totem rank. So the beast gods want one as well. The answer will most likely be that they want it in Gathuzan or Nerid. Gathuzan is divine beast territory, and Nerid is mostly under the spider goddess, but the other beast gods are also worshipped there. Carl nodded. Well, I don't really see an issue with it. I'm sure that they can find some appropriate method of payment. Nacht snorted as he stifled laughter, and Carl shared a smile with him. It wasn't hard to guess what the old dragon was thinking. Now that Carl had a whole space full of baby dragons, he didn't need to go looking for them anymore. But the most likely price for a priceless treasure was to offer him a cub from one of the divine beast royal lineages. Unlike the dragons, who were guided by their patron, and would eventually grow up well on their own, The divine beasts usually needed guidance to stay on track and reach their potential. Carl was an excellent choice for that mission, as he already had so many other wildly successful beasts in his care. Just based on his track record, they would treat him well. Drinks were brought out by the house staff, and someone called in the bards to play for the evening. A regular band was an option, but the actual bards could use their magic to refresh and revitalize the partygoers, keeping the event going longer and keeping anyone from getting excessively drunk and causing a scene. Well, too big of a scene because there was bound to be one with so many big egos in one room, even when they were all friends. The drunker they got, the more that they needed a reason to compete over something, and more than one challenge had to be moved to the roof of the compound, which had been reinforced with protective barriers for just this sort of thing. But that gave Carl a great idea to meditate on when he took Dana to bed. Instead of a full-fledged trial tower, Xylaz would likely do better with an arena, where you could enter to fight a challenge against either a real person or an artificial challenger, with spectators and betting. Because Xylaz. Chapter 1230, Crowded Beds. Carl woke up the next morning and gave Dana a hug, then realized that while she was fluffy, she was oddly lumpy. "Is it morning?" a groggy Tion asked. "Why are you sleeping on Dana's chest?" "It's soft and warm, like being back in the burrow with Mother." "I'm going back to sleep." Carl chuckled and left the little fox to his nap. Dana was worn out this morning, but he didn't need to actually get out of bed. He was just mentally formulating the method to make a training arena without physically building the arena. He had discovered last night that portability would be the key. Not all duels wanted to go to a formal training area, and there were already buildings for that. But if he could make a form of illusionary domain, with solid obstacles inside that could be hit by the contestants, it would be perfect. Just activate it, let the contestants step inside, and fight it out wherever they happen to be. Carl was fairly sure that he knew how to coat the inside of the illusionary domain with solid surfaces, if he activated it with an object created through runecrafting. But it would not be a small object, no matter how tiny his writing was. The idea of the mountain with its layered slices was actually a practical one, but Carl was thinking of an obelisk, made with layers of stones, each enchanted, then attached by a base. If he did it that way, he could make the object under 2 meters tall and still have the needed spells. The domain, the solid interior from earth manipulation, the protective spells for the spectators and the arena itself, the opponents, and a referee. Having an illusion with some basic sentience would let the artifact adjust its own barrier levels and create requested opponents from the available golems. He didn't have an unlimited variety, but his golem spell created beasts of most sorts, and he could create dungeon bosses that he knew. That should be a popular feature for the raiding teams. Being able to bring a team in to practice, or try out new strategies in a setting where the monster would stop before actually killing you, was a huge thing. But that also meant he needed to build a healing spell and recovery area. If only there was a template for this. He should have asked the other Darklight host guild masters. One of them was almost guaranteed to know a suitable sort of skill. Unfortunately, the idea had occurred to him too late, and now that they were on different planets again, he was unable to directly message them, though the additional branches still showed as active, but out of range in his system interface. With them so far away, he had no way to contact them, and he didn't have the skills to open an interplanetary portal between guild houses, even though the system would let him target the ones that were within range from Xylaz. He had never been to the Psyhosesa guild house, but in theory, he could open a portal to the location that Matilda had designated within the property. After much consideration, the plinth model really did seem like the best option to create the arena. It was easy to layer, could be placed anywhere, and he could make it to be distinctively representative of the Darklight host. Half black and half white wouldn't hurt anything when he enchanted it, and it wasn't supposed to be a decorative piece, as most of the runes were hidden any way that you arranged it. Carl mentally designed the entire plinth, all 50 layers of it, and then began to work on altering it so that it would be more practical and easier to keep charged when the combatants damaged the protective spells on the arena. The last thing that anyone needed was for the whole spell to collapse in the middle of a battle and dump the spectators on the ground. Being an illusionary domain, it was larger inside than outside, so depending where the arena was set up, some of the guests might not land anywhere safe. Kara saw many fun ways that could be abused, But Carl wasn't going to let her deliberately use the collapse of the arena to dump guests into secure areas that might get them arrested. Could be funny, but more than a little troublesome. Bored, Kara came out to join them all in bed, snuggling up to the other side of Dana, then carefully sniffing her to see if she smelled pregnant. There were wagers on when they would get baby Dana mages, and she intended to win. There was a chance that Thor might have this one. He had pretty good instincts, but with a bit of advanced knowledge, Kara was sure that she could influence the odds in her favor. Do you know that I can hear your thoughts, right? And Remy, no making potions to induce labor just so that you can get the exact time and date that you have bet on. Carl warned. He's getting too good at this. I didn't even let myself think of it while he was awake. And he still guessed. Remy commended Carl's ingenuity. Dana opened one eye. Is it normal for them to be plotting against us like that? Completely shameless. Carl laughed. They forgot that you can hear them now, so they thought that you would be caught unawares when they started making plans to get you to have baby Dana mages on their selected dates. If I'm not wrong, they've already started to arrange date nights for us so that they can maximize the odds that conception occurs within the correct window for their wagers.
Dana sighed.
At least one of them isn't completely shameless. Ray snorted in amusement. Opal isn't innocent. She just wants to make a film about it. It doesn't matter to her what dates the filming runs. The spider had a point. That was not an improvement.